podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast with Rich Ferraro.
Hello and welcome to the latest 1865 match reports, and we're recording just after a joyous occasion when Nottingham Forest have managed to get a 3-1 home victory over Leeds United. And joining me in the studio today is Baz. So Baz, first of all, we know you're happy about the result, but how was that for you?
It was not a classic game. It wasn't particularly entertaining, but it was really good to see us have a bit of fight about us and a load of defensive resolve, which obviously has been very sadly lacking for quite a long time.
And I was musing on Thursday after the 0-0 draw against Sturm Graz that sometimes you need to make decisions about the significance of things way after the event. So the Sturm Graz draw, stalemate, wouldn't look so bad if we managed to get the result against Leeds, but if we hadn't got a result against them today, then it looks like a really bad week. And now the other thing that I would say in retrospect is, having gone so many matches without scoring a Premier League goal, that's now 5 goals in 2 Premier League matches. So how does that feel?
Yep, it does feel like the wheels are coming back on our season. It's like with the international break coming up and everything, it was quite important, obviously, for us not only to get the win. Getting 3 goals is obviously very, very important, and also to make sure that the gap between us and the teams above us didn't grow too much. But the other thing now is I'm starting to feel reasonably optimistic about our chances over the next few months, because it does feel like Sean Dyche has started the turnaround that we needed to have. So we are solid. We're getting harder to beat. The football hasn't been very pretty, but we are scoring goals, and we look like the confidence is edging back into the side.
Yeah, and looking on the surface, the table isn't pretty reading, because Forest are 19th, second from bottom. They're on 9 points. Wolves are way at the bottom on 2 points, but actually West Ham and Burnley just above Forest are on 10. Leeds in 16th are on 11. Fulham are on 11, and so actually basically a couple of good results could see us go up to maybe as far as 14th, or. So that you say that feeling of upward trajectory is definitely there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. On today's match, the team news. So Matt Sells came back in for the league, having been rested the other night. The back four was Nikola Savona, Nikola Milenkovic, Murillo, and Nico Williams. In midfield, we had Anderson and Sangaré in the middle of the park, and we had Ndoye and Dominguez manning the flanks, with Gibbs White playing as a split striker from Igor Jesus. And I want to start with that because you see that 4-2-3-1 is a very fashionable formation in the last sort of 10 years or so, maybe 15 or so. But actually the way Sean Dyche plays, and we saw this on Thursday and we definitely saw this today, is almost like a 4-4-2. It's more kind of 2 banks of 4 with split strikers, isn't it?
Certainly, as soon as we lost possession, if we lost possession in their half, we went straight into a 4-4-2. It was blatantly obvious that's what the lineup was.
Yeah, and it got me thinking actually of Dyche era Burnley, when quite often they would play maybe with Josh Brownhill on one side of the pitch with a McNeil or someone like that as a winger on the other side, and that's essentially what Nico Dominguez was doing for Forest today. Now, in terms of the match itself, so like you said, it probably wasn't the greatest spectacle for the neutral, but one thing you did point out, and I wasn't aware of this statistic, is that Leeds had an XG of 0.06.
Yes, apparently they had one shot in the entire first half, which was their goal.
Yeah. Now, before we get to that, a couple of things that are worth pointing out. So, the first one is that Forest very nearly struck first blood a couple of times. Morgan Gibbs-White not had a good week. I think we can agree on that. He had a really, really difficult night against Sturm Graz. He missed that penalty. He's been dropped from the England squad, and Tommy Tuchel saying, well, it's down to form.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be honest, no one can really argue with that. And certainly one of the criticisms that I've had of Morgan in the last few weeks has been that thing that sometimes you get with flair players where they're trying too hard. And essentially what it leads to is a bit of fannying about. And when Morgan had his chance, I was screaming for him to pass it to the left for the overlapping Nico Williams, but he actually cut inside and had a shot which he stabbed towards the far corner, and Lucas Perry made a decent save. So in fair play to Morgan, he saw something that many of the fans didn't and had a go. So that was important. The next one, a corner came in. I think it was it Jesus had a shot, and it took a deflection and brought out an outstanding save from Lucas Perry, didn't it?
Yeah.
Perry was basically sat on the ground, going the other way, managed to completely adjust his weight, get a big old slap of the palm to the ball to parry it, and then Dan Ndoye, who was on rushing, he managed to get to the ball before then. Now, Ndoye was offside, so nothing would have counted there. But as so often happens, and the reason I'm talking about these chances before coming back to the Leeds goal is because the Leeds goal came in the very next move, didn't it?
Yeah, and it felt predictable because of the story of this season so far, that we had this extremely good chance that we just couldn't quite get it over the line, literally get it over the line. And then they go and, I mean, to be fair, our defending was pretty poor. They basically just passed the ball faster than we could react to rip us apart, really.
Well, so a few key moments there. So as Leeds got over the halfway line, there was a loose ball, and Nicolo Savona went for it against, I think, Noah Okafor. And Okafor just got in there just that half a second earlier. And that put Forest on the back foot defensively. They weren't expecting that to happen. So the back four were then on the back foot, to put it simply. Then Brendan Aronson, who I thought was Leeds' best player by quite some margin and yet was substituted early, so I don't know what's going on there. He then very calmly received the ball and played it pretty quickly to the right-hand side where Lukas Nmecha was coming in, and where, I don't want to be too critical, Nico Williams has been our man of the match pretty much every match for the last few weeks. But he did the right thing to start off with. He tried to shepherd Nmecha as wide as he could, but in doing so, he stood off by an extra yard. And from our position in the lower Brian Clough stand, we had a perfect angle to see Nmecha arrow the ball down towards the bottom corner, out of the reach of Matt Sells, before Williams could close him down. And fair play to him, it was a very, very good shot. And the fact that Leeds' XG was 0.06 shows that there wasn't that good a chance of him scoring it, but score it he did, and Forest were a goal down. And I think it's fair to say, as you mentioned, that there was a kind of feeling of deja vu around that.
Yeah. To be fair, the fans reacted by cheering the team on. It didn't sort of go quiet as it would have done under a certain other manager. But the team reacted the same way. You could see from the body language of the players as they returned to the centre circle that they wanted to carry on. It wasn't like, oh, here we go again. It was like, right, let's put this right.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things, so that goal came in the 13th minute, so fairly early on. I think a few weeks ago, what would have happened 2 minutes later is would have been more likely to concede another one. But as it happened, Forest went ahead and they actually got one back. Before we talk about the goal, how important was it that they managed to strike back pretty quickly?
It was. I think that it's one. The story of the season so far has been us kind of dominating the games, getting the ball into the final third, and then just missing the chances. And it could have started to feel a little bit desperate if the first half had carried on with us, because we dominated the game. I mean, there wasn't very much of a football to watch really, but we were the better side compared to Leeds. And so if we hadn't scored, I could see that sort of like, oh, it's going to be another of those days sort of slipping into everyone's minds.
Yeah. I think it's worth pointing out, having heaped praise upon Lucas Perry for that save he made earlier, that he was not exactly perfect in that first half. So there are a couple of efforts where, let's say, it brought back ghosts of goalkeepers past, didn't it, for all football fans? In fact, the chap next to me was saying, it's been a while since we've had a chance of dodgy keeper, isn't it? So there was, in particular, a chance where Dan and Doy, I think it was, had a shot from the left-hand side, and it was a fairly easy catch for Perry, but he almost dropped it between his legs, and in trying to adjust his feet to try and get back to it, almost ended up like shuffling it back on over the line. And there was 2 or 3 moments like that, and actually he was partly culpable in goalkeeping terms for the goal that we scored, because Dan and Doy was on the right-hand side, Forrest had shuffled down the right-hand side, and Doy put the ball in. Perry managed to get a hand to it, but he basically palmed it into the edge of the 6-yard box, between the 6-yard box and the penalty spot.
He did a John.
Yes. Is that a phrase now?
Yeah.
Okay. So Perry parried and did a John, and Ibrahim Sangaré was following up, and he side-footed it home. And I have to say, again, from our vantage point in the Lower Brian Clough at the time, I was going, you know what? That's good. He's taken the time and he's stroked it home, and good for him. It's a nice easy chance, and hopefully that'll get his confidence up. Actually, looking at it back on the replay, it was there's a lot more going on than I gave him credit for. There's players flying all about, and he had to be quite composed to put it away the way he did, I think.
Although actually thinking about it, he's got a particular sort of shape that he picks up when he wins the ball back or picks the ball up from deep and then plays one of those vertical passes that's straight down the middle, that's along the ground. He has this particular sort of body shape, and he did exactly the same thing. He was basically doing a forward pass into the net.
Well, yeah, that's true, actually. And the way he adopted that shape was, again, because he's such a tall guy, and his kind of lankiness, I suppose, means that he basically almost leapt onto his left foot to steady himself to sweep it home with his right. Just another word on Sangaré. Obviously, good for him to get his goal. Apparently his first goal for Forest. I thought he'd scored one last season, but maybe I'm mistaken. Anyway, he did get a yellow card on 33 minutes, which was one of 2 instances of taking one for the team, which was that there was a midfielder getting away from him and he tripped him up. And at first I thought it didn't look that deliberate, but no one complained. And then there was a moment later on in the half where I think it was, it might have been Nmecha, it might have been Okafor, and one of them was herring forward, and you could see Sangaré about to stick his leg between the feet of the running player, and you could see him think, hang on, I'm already on a yellow, and he had to pull his leg away. And in fact, he actually did a very, very good job of tracking back in that instance once he decided not to do that, and alongside Milenkovic, they managed to just about stem the danger. So, yeah, I mean, I guess those are all things you want from an all-action midfielder.
Yeah, and I mean, that's also another point, is that what Leeds, when they did break, they broke straight down the centre. So I think it was Dominguez as well had to do the same thing and take a player down to get the yellow card, just to stop their momentum. And
Murillo.
Oh yeah. And I mean, actually, that's fair enough. You want that.
Yeah. And it's called taking one for the team for a reason. So what that means is that Forest had equalised. We'd had a couple of yellow cards. I think it's also worth pointing out, and dare I say it, Leeds weren't very good, were they? No. So it really felt like we were toiling quite a lot, didn't it?
they're big. There were moments where they could move the ball quite well, but actually their biggest tactic was spoiling. Doing a Midtjylland on us, but this time we actually managed to cope with it a bit better.
Yeah, and Midtjylland are better than them. As again, chatting to the bloke next to me, a couple of things. Apparently, their transfer policy was not a single player who they signed was less than 6'1" over the summer. And then secondly, you don't choose a midfield pair of Sean Longstaff and Ethan Ampadu if you want creativity to be your main asset in the middle of the park. But although Forest remained in control, at half-time, it remained 1-1.
The 1865 Match Report.
AI agents are everywhere, automating tasks and making decisions at machine speed. But agents make mistakes. Just one rogue agent can do big damage before you even notice. Rubrik Agent Cloud is the only platform that helps you monitor agents, set guardrails, and rewind mistakes, so you can unleash agents, not risk. Accelerate your AI transformation at Rubrik.com. That's RUBRIK.com.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Okay, Baz, I think a good place to start when we're talking about the second half is that Forest made a triple substitution before the hour. And that was really important, wasn't it? Because Leeds had started that second half trying to press us a little bit more, didn't they?
Yeah, they were disrupting our play a lot more. Jesus in particular was getting muscled off the ball whenever he was near it. Sangaré was on a yellow card, so couldn't quite be as physical. He was obviously being a little bit more careful about it. And we couldn't keep hold of the ball because they were just muscling us off it. And you could feel the crowd getting a little bit edgy. You could see the players were getting a little bit frustrated with it. And so we were saying this isn't, we could do with a change. We could see the players lining. We could see that Yates was stripping off and getting ready to come on. We're like, that's a good plan because of Sangaré with his yellow card. We could do with that little bit of energy. And then we could see Hutchinson stripping off, and we're like, actually, that's a really, really good person to put on. And then we could see Taiwo getting ready to come on, and I was like, actually, that's absolutely perfect because Jesus isn't really seeing any of the ball now.
And all three of those players really, really made a positive impact, replacing the players who they came on for. And that positive impact, although they're in different positions, was all down to the same two factors, which was energy and aggression. It was adding a degree of energy, it was adding a new level of aggression in different ways. So the aggression in the case of Taiwo is obviously the fact that he plays on the last defender and Jesus sometimes moves around a lot more. In the case of Yates, it's because he is going to kind of jump into tackles and jump into headers in a way that Sangaré doesn't. And in the case of Hutchinson, so he came on for Nico Dominguez. It saw Dan and Doyle go to the left wing. Hutchinson, you know, he's pretty much a chalk on your boots kind of winger, isn't he? As an inverted winger. And it really, really it meant that Leeds was suddenly pressed back. And you equated it for students of Forest history about 15 odd years ago to putting on Gareth McCleary and Dele Adebola, didn't you?
Yeah. So for people who don't know, Dele Adebola was a big striker who Billy Davies would put on when he wanted the ball to stick up higher up the pitch. And Gareth McCleary was a winger who, again, he wasn't necessarily the most talented winger, but once he got the ball, it was very, very difficult for the defenders to get it off him. And given that in that first part of the second half, we were struggling to keep hold of the ball, just that extra energy and that ability to make the ball stick. So with Taiwo on, we could play the ball long, and then he was, even if he didn't win the ball, their defenders weren't able to keep hold of it or pass it as they wanted to. He was really, really good at blocking their passing lanes and bustling about and getting in their way. So they ended up making the passes that they didn't want to, which meant that we had a better chance of winning it back off them. And then Hutchinson just was so direct. He just ran at their fullback, ran at them constantly, and just gave them something completely different to think about.
Yeah, and it made a very, very obvious difference because it only took another 10 minutes for Hutch to get the ball, and it's worth pointing out.
Actually, before that, so when the triple substitution came on, we absolutely took the game to Leeds. There was like a period of about 5 minutes where the ball was just in the final third.
Yes.
And we were like, got to make this pressure count, and it didn't. And then Leeds sort of managed to gain a foothold back in the game and took the ball up the other end. And I was like, we're going to regret this, but it didn't happen that way.
And that's exactly when actually the Forest scored the goal. So it's Murillo with a diagonal, wasn't it? From left to right. And Hutchinson doing what wingers of his type do. And that was to get the ball, to run at his defender. He went down to the byline, cut back, and onto his favoured left foot, and he put in a cross, which was basically on the 6-yard line. And Morgan Gibbs-White, we talked earlier, hadn't we, about how he was playing essentially as a split striker. That was the run and header of a centre-forward, wasn't it?
I mean, as the other thing, from where we were sat, at first I thought Hutchinson had shot. Mm-hmm. And the bloke next to me was like...
he was adamant, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was adamant that Morgan hadn't touched it and it was a Hutchinson shot. Having watched a replay of it, actually, it wasn't going to go in. It was a cross, and Morgan did head it in. But it was exactly what you want from a winger. It was like directness, putting a cross in, and then Morgan, as you say, doing a forwards thing of being in the right place to take the header and just gently glance it in. It didn't even take much power.
Yeah, I was actually very impressed with the way he used his neck on this one because obviously sometimes players who, he's not the biggest guy, and we've commented in the past, haven't we? In his first season at Forest, we commented about how he's surprisingly good in the air for someone of his size. He showed a good degree, and that's all fine when you're trying to win headers against other midfielders or other defenders. But this showed a real kind of deftness. He used his neck to just, like you say, direct the ball. He knew that there was no point putting power on it, trying to put it back the way it came. He just directed it gently towards the bottom corner. So I was very, very impressed with the way he took that. I think it is also worth pointing out, and this is down to the speed of movement that Hutchinson brought, that Morgan basically had the freedom of the box. There was no defender anywhere near him. So if he hadn't scored that, then that would have come down to a terrible, terrible miss. But he did score it, and Leeds' problems shouldn't be our problems in that respect. So after that, what I think is worth pointing out is that Forest were in control, but as you often do, you pointed out, yeah, but 1 goal lead isn't enough. We need another goal. And sure enough, Leeds made their own substitutions. So 5 minutes after the goal, they made a triple sub, and they went from playing essentially a 4-2-3-1-ish, or 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, to basically going 4-4-2 with wingers, because they brought on Pirro and Calvert-Lewin. Pirro playing as a split striker just behind Calvert-Lewin. Dan James comes on for Aronson, and so James is on the right, Okafor on the left. And James in particular, I felt, caused his his Welsh teammates, Nico Williams, a few problems, didn't he?
Yeah.
Just because of the level of pace and the fact that, again, third mention for the bloke next to me, he pointed out that Dan James is a bit like Anthony Elanga in that he's very, very fast. He can play with both feet, and you're never quite sure what you're going to get with him. And sure enough, James had a couple of moments where Nico had the better of him, but he also had quite an interesting moment where the ball came out to him towards the edge of the box, and he cut inside on his left foot, had a shot which Sells had to save. Now, given some of the criticism that Sells has had, and Sells will know that he's not been at his best this season, you pointed out that that's a kind of save where it would have been easy to do a John, but actually he did a Sells.
Yeah, he did. He did exactly what we would have expected of Sells from last season. So it wasn't a really difficult save, but it was also one where he had to do the work and he put the ball in the right place. And I said afterwards, that's going to give him a bit of confidence actually, because he's done exactly the right thing. And yes, it was something that he probably needed. And I did think actually that there was a little bit earlier where he hadn't come for a cross, and I didn't notice that again for the rest of the game. He looked much more commanding.
And this might be a good moment to point out that the sponsors man of the match went to Nikola Milenkovic. And certainly the two M's at the centre of defence are looking much more like themselves, the two M's that we saw last season. You pointed out in the first half as well, and this is potentially a bit of a Dychism, that the centre-backs, they are peeling a bit wider in defensive positions, and whether that's down to the way the fullbacks are moving or not, I don't know. But we've also noticed that Dougie Luiz, Ryan Yates, Ibrahim Sangaré, whoever's been playing that kind of 6-8 role has been almost dropping in as a third centre-back in various moments. So I think that is something that we'll probably see a bit more. And that's in direct contrast to, for example, the goal that Krupi scored for Bournemouth, where the two M's got confused with each other, got in each other's way, and neither did anything. Whereas today they were much more decisive, weren't they?
Yeah, and they as I say, we looked like the confidence was coming back, and
the goalkeeper takes confidence from his defenders, and vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. However, the bloke next to me was like, what I really don't want to happen now is us to go ultra defensive and just try and see out the game, because that's just going to invite pressure onto us. And I said, I'm pretty sure it doesn't matter how we play, there's still always going to be a massive threat that we're going to concede another goal. And actually, I'm very pleased to say I was wrong, because Leeds did pile up a bit of pressure on, and it resulted in, about 88 minutes or something. Morato came on for Gibbs White.
And worth pointing out, Leeds had made another couple of switches. So they brought on Strauch for Biol in the back four, but then they took off Goodmanson, their left back, to put on Jack Harrison. So essentially, they kind of went... so people of a certain age might remember that in sensible soccer, if you go into attack mode, it puts you in a 3-3-4 formation. So Harrison was nominally playing as an auxiliary left back, but he's basically playing as a winger. And it meant that Forest suddenly were in danger of getting pressed back and outnumbered in defensive positions, and that's what brought Morato's introduction about 5 minutes later, didn't it?
And I wasn't surprised that it was Gibbs White coming off, just because he's obviously scored that goal, and he's another of those players who's played a lot of minutes recently. Yeah. So it didn't surprise me. Going to the back, this kind of, we turned into a 3-4-3 sort of, with if we're not in a back five.
Yeah.
Just to solidify things, that kind of made sense, but luckily, it didn't just invite pressure onto us, because we've got Amari Hutchinson.
Well, yeah, and this is exactly what you want your tricky winger to do, isn't it? So he made a break, and he tried to do this several times. In fairness, at this point of the match, every time Forest got the ball, it was like, yeah, give it to Amari and let him run at him. And especially after they took, which makes you think actually, taking their left back off was an insane thing to do, wasn't it? It just occurred to me like 2 hours after full time. But it was an insane thing to do. And with one of these runs, Hutchinson, he basically took on Harrison, beat him about 3 times in one go.
Turned him inside out.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just as he was pulling into the box, basically Harrison bundled him over from behind. Now, bizarrely enough, this was just as the board was going up for stoppage time, wasn't it? And bizarrely enough, there was a 2-minute VAR check. And listeners, if you look at the replay of the incident, you'll be wondering how on earth it could have taken so long for them to check it because they were checking whether it was inside the area or not. It's so clearly inside the area.
Yeah.
It would have taken one glance and go, yeah, that's inside, lads. And in fairness to the ref, he gave it as a penalty straight away. He was just waiting for the VAR. So then the question being, well, Jesus has gone off, Gibbs White has gone off. Who's going to take the penalty? And so, not massive surprise, I don't think, to see Elliot Anderson step up. I think Nico was showing an interest as well, and of course he has taken quite a belter in one of the last season's penalty shootouts. But Anderson, now, I think it's also fair to point out, it looked to most of us where we were sat as though Anderson was playing most of the game on one leg. Tommy T had said that he's called up Adam Wharton to the England squad because Anderson has been playing with pain. That's a quote.
Sean Dyche said the other day he's got multiple injuries.
Yeah. And yet he played 90 minutes and he took that penalty like he's a seasoned pro rather than what he is, which is a 21-year-old midfielder with only one proper season of Premier League football under his belt. And that was a celebration of, obviously, excitement and joy for Anderson and the team, but also relief that we'd put that game to bed.
Also, just want to point out that I looked over and Morgan Gibbs-White, who had only just come off, so he hadn't even put his tracksuit top on, so he was still in his red shirt, had run onto the pitch to give him a hug.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which
absolutely.
It's probably illegal because it was...
Yeah, don't say anything because given the way that the match was reffed. Now, this is one of those things where I'm going to point out, as ever, did the way that the ref made decisions, did that influence the result in any way, shape or form? No, not at all. But it was one of those you had no idea what it was going to give. And the only booking for the away team was Sean Longstaff because Dan Ndoye was about to break down the left wing, and as he got over the halfway line, Longstaff pulled him back, clear foul, took him down because he couldn't catch up with him. Taking one for the team, fine. Except the fact the ball then broke and Nico Williams then picked up the ball and he was pulled back by someone else. And then the ball took about 2 minutes to go out of play and the ref just ignored the second incident. He booked Longstaff for it and he ignored the second incident. Jack Harrison, he pulled back Hutchinson. It didn't stop play because there's an advantage to Forest, but the ref didn't even talk to Harrison afterwards. There were so many of those weird incidents where you just kind of... Ref, are you not watching the game?
And then, so we all know about the corners that have been given against us.
Yes.
Whereas in this game, we had 3 that went our way. So there was one which was a Leeds goal kick, clearly a Leeds goal kick that became a corner for us. And then there were 2 where, as far as we could see, it was definitely Leeds attacking corners that were given as goal kicks for us. Who knows? The
very, very strange thing about that one was, in particular, the moment where Hutchinson was trying to help out his defence. He poked the ball back, and it was one of those where you kind of go, oh, crap.
Yeah, he thought Savona was behind him, and he got the angles completely wrong. So he held up his hands in apology for putting the ball out of play. And then the referee gives a goal kick for us. Yeah,
I just... So, step forward, Jared Gillett. Well done. And also your assistants, Neil Davis and Edward Smart. And the fourth official, Anthony Taylor. So, listeners, you can draw your own conclusions from all of that. I also just want to, before we finish our match report, point out that, as ever, it is Remembrance Sunday today, so there was an impeccably observed last post. A couple of shushes here and there from where we were, but I think that was people kind of mumbling rather than any attempt to disrupt it. And also, now I wasn't here for this bit, but did the club do something to recognise Stephen Crean?
They did.
Obviously, we send our thoughts and best wishes to Stephen after the fabulous and brave intervention he made after the Manchester United match last week in a horrific train attack. We will be back with 2 or 3 podcasts during the international break. So as well as our Football Terrorist discussion show next weekend, we've got a couple of big interviews for you that have been recorded and are in the can. One with Forest legend, stalwart, Steve Chettle, ex-captain, man who played most of his career at the City Ground, local lad. And then from the opposite end of the scale, we've got an interview with former Forest striker from the 1990s, Brian Roy. Interesting character, interesting interview. We'll have that in your feed very, very soon. And trust us, it's worth listening to. And the bits that are on the cutting room floor are seriously, on lawyers' advice, I would say, we've left those bits out. So thank you very much to you, Baz, and thank you, listener, for joining us. Keep with us, and we will have some interesting stuff in your feed soon. In the meantime, it feels very, very nice to go into the international break with a victory, so come on, you Reds.
You've been listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave us a review. It helps other listeners find our content.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.